March 11th, a day that, on the surface, looked like any other in the underground rap world. But on one particular subreddit, a community built entirely around obsessing over a single rap collective, it was anything but ordinary. Two members of Haunted Mound, the horrorcore group that had spent years building a cult-like following, announced they were leaving. No explanation, no drama on the surface, just a few words posted almost simultaneously about parting ways on mutual terms. That vagueness was like gasoline on a fire. Within hours, theories were everywhere. Was there a falling out? Had the group's leader pushed them out? Was this the beginning of the end for one of underground rap's strangest, most devoted fan ecosystems? To understand why this moment hit so hard, you have to go back. Back before the mixtapes, before the sold-out tours, before the cult following, to a remote, decaying building in Northern California, where one teenager built something out of nothing. This is the story of Haunted Mound. Every origin story needs a setting. For most rappers, it's a bedroom studio, a basement, maybe a friend's garage. For Sematary, it was a slaughterhouse. Not metaphorically. An actual, physical slaughterhouse. Built in the early 1900s, abandoned for decades, last inhabited by an elderly woman who reportedly died inside its walls. It sat remote, isolated, exactly the kind of place most people would avoid. Sematary moved in and started making music from scratch inside it. It's hard to overstate how much that detail shapes everything that came after. The horror aesthetic wasn't a costume he put on for music videos. He was quite literally producing his entire catalog inside a building with a body count. Graveman grew up in Northern California, and by his own account, was the kind of kid who gravitated toward the dark and the strange. Horror movies, slasher imagery, a fascination with making the macabre feel cool rather than frightening. As he put it himself in one interview, it's easy to make compelling imagery out of that kind of material. The trick is committing to it fully, instead of treating it as a gimmick, and he committed. Hockey masks pulled straight from slasher films, chainsaws, bloody visuals, a persona that blurred the line between performance and genuine obsession. But underneath the gore was something more grounded, a real technical student of music production. The horror imagery got people's attention. The production is what made them stay. By 2019, that combination, DIY horror aesthetics layered over blown-out, distorted trap production, had a name: Haunted Mound. A collective is only as strong as the people inside it, and Sematary didn't build this alone. Early on, the core lineup took shape. Sematary as the face and driving creative force, alongside Hackle, Turnabout, and Gonerville, each bringing their own corner of the sound, but all operating under the same horrorcore meets witch house umbrella that Sematary had established. There was also Ghost Mountain, one of the true founding members, known for an eerier, more folk-infused delivery that stood apart from Sematary's harsher style. Together, in those early years, they helped define what Haunted Mound actually sounded like. Somewhere between the bludgeoning 808s of Chicago drill, the chaotic energy of early Gucci Mane mixtapes, and the icy atmosphere of witch house groups like Salem. It worked because it didn't sound like anything else happening in rap at the time. While most of the genre was chasing radio polish, Haunted Mound leaned the opposite direction, embracing distortion, embracing the lo-fi, embracing the uncomfortable. For a certain kind of listener, kids who might have been into SoundCloud rap a decade earlier, or hard rock 20 years before that, it scratched an itch nothing else could. It's worth pausing here, because the Haunted Mound story isn't just about the music, it's about the audience that formed around it. Within a few years, a dedicated online community had built up, concentrated heavily on Reddit, where fans didn't just discuss the music, they dissected everything. Lyrics, Instagram posts, even Sematary's personal habits became subjects of endless theorizing. Sematary himself has been candid, almost uncomfortable, about this dynamic. In interviews, he's described avoiding fan discourse entirely for the sake of his own mental health, acknowledging that a lot of what circulates online about him isn't grounded in reality. At the same time, he's drawn a clear line between that online intensity and his actual in-person interactions with fans, which he's described as overwhelmingly positive. Fans singing along, buying merch, genuinely excited rather than combative. That contrast, a chaotic, theory-obsessed online fandom versus a warm, supportive in-person one, became one of the defining tensions of being a Haunted Mound artist. And it set the stage for exactly what would happen when something actually did go wrong inside the group. In 2021, with Haunted Mound's aesthetic newly established and the fan base rapidly growing, Ghost Mountain did something nobody expected. He erased his catalog and walked away from music entirely. No public statement explaining why, no farewell tour. He simply vanished from the project he'd helped found. For a fan base already primed to dissect every detail, this was rocket fuel. Reddit threads picked apart old posts looking for clues. Theories ranged from creative differences to a personal falling out with Sematary himself. The truth, as Ghost Mountain would only reveal years later in his first ever interview, was less dramatic and more human. A breakdown in communication between him and Sematary that left both of them estranged, with neither side really addressing it directly. Not an explosive falling out, more a slow drift, the kind that happens when two people stop talking and let the silence become the relationship. It would take roughly 2 years before the two of them even broached the subject of him returning. When Ghost Mountain finally did return, it wasn't framed as a comeback tour or a victory lap. It was framed as something closer to closure. He described the process as wanting to clear the air, and in doing so, realizing there had been more mutual understanding between him and Sematary than either of them had assumed during the years of silence. As their friendship rebuilt itself, so did the creative chemistry that had originally made Haunted Mound work. The result was his debut solo mixtape, October Country, a project built around the idea of returning to something that no longer exists in the same form. Folk textures, trap foundations, a touch of 80s influenced production, and underneath all of it, a clear emotional through line about the impossibility of fully going back to where you started. It's a fitting theme, considering what the group itself was about to go through. Which brings us back to where we started, March 11th. By this point, Turnabout and Gonerville had been with Haunted Mound for roughly 2.5 years. No longer the new additions, but key contributors who had helped shape the group's recent sound. Their departure, announced less than a month before a new tour was set to launch, blindsided not just the fan base, but reportedly Sematary himself. He's since described the experience in blunt terms. It hurt, and it forced a scramble to rework an entire tour lineup on short notice. But when asked directly whether a moment like this might push him toward going solo permanently, leaving Haunted Mound behind, his answer was immediate and unambiguous. Absolutely not. He's described the collective as a permanent part of his identity, something inked onto his own skin, not something he'd walk away from just because it got harder to hold together. True to that, Sematary's response to the upheaval wasn't retreat, it was output. Not long after, he released Bloody Angel, his 10th mixtape in 5 years. It delivered everything fans expected: the buzzsaw production, the snarling vocals, lyrics steeped in nihilism and menace. But it also pushed somewhere new, including a shoegaze-influenced single called Wendigo. Proof that even while holding the group together through internal turmoil, Sematary was still expanding what Haunted Mound's sound could be. Whatever comes next for Sematary, Hackle, Ghost Mountain, and the rest of the collective, one thing seems certain: the story isn't finished.